Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk. I'm Tracy Morgan. Always nice to have you this half hour. This is our half hour that we get to talk to great professionals in and around the area about issues that are important to you. And today we're going to be talking with compassionate certification centers. And we've talked to them before in the past. It's nice to have them back on the show. And before we get to our topic of the day, let me tell you all the different ways that you can listen. Because if you are listening on our AM or our FM, I know, brand new, it's so much fun to be able to say that, then listen to us on the radio. Fabulous. That's great. But if you've gone digital, like the rest of us have, you can listen to us on Alexa-powered devices. You have an app that would go on your mobile device, or you can listen to us on our website as we stream live at WISR680.com. That part hasn't changed, by the way. And then you can also listen to this as the podcast of the day. So when we're done, we'll go ahead and upload this to our website. You can catch it there and listen at your leisure. All right. With us today is Dr. Jennifer Hawks. She's the Chief Medical Director of Compassionate Certification Centers, and we know that name well here in this area. Dr. Hawks, it's nice to talk to you today. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Tracy. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. And I know we're into fall, so I know we're going to talk a little bit about fall and allergies and back to school and things along that line today. And it's interesting because you and I were emailing each other before we had our conversation, and you made a comment to me, something about allergies are a total opposite side of the immune system from viruses. And I'm wondering if you could go down that road for us and explain what the difference is.
That's correct, Tracy. I'd be happy to. So what ends up happening in our immune system is that we have different cells that get differentiated over the years based on our exposures and the way our body is formed and developed. So what usually happens is we will either have a Th1 dominance or a Th2 dominance. So just to explain that a little bit, Th1 focuses more on that cell-mediated immunity. So it's things that are going to build the cells that are pro-inflammatory to help, fight and acknowledge threats in the system that are viruses and bacteria and things like that, so that we can actually develop that defense system against those things. So with COVID looming, we really want to make sure that our body is responding and developing cells to fight viruses. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Th2 immune responses. Th2 immune responses are humoral immunity, and that is actually more associated with promoting things like IgE and eosinophil production. That is more associated with the cells needed to fight our allergies and things that elicit an allergic response in the body. So it's really interesting when you look into it with making sure that our immune system is balanced and not just focusing on fighting one thing, leaving us susceptible to the whole other side.
Well, what's happening in our body when you have the Th1 and Th2? Is our body... I'm wondering when those folks have allergies, like what's happening in the system? Do they not have enough of an immune response, or is it just not recognizing, or how do you build it up so someone does not suffer from the effects or symptoms of an allergy?
Right. There's a lot of different ways to address that. I like to focus on balancing the immune function. So if someone has a lot of eosinophilic triggers, so things that activate IgE, which are known as true allergies if they activate IgE, then the humoral side of our immunity, the Th2 response, is going to push a lot of those interleukins that actually help to, create mast cells and approach the histamine response in the body to what's known as a foreign invader. So those Th2 cells are going to help us fight allergies. But at the same time, if we're pushing that side of the immune system to develop a lot of cells to fight the allergies for what we're exposed to, then that on the other end, we're not creating as many cells that fight viruses and bacteria. What ends up happening a lot of times is people that, let's say they grew up with all the allergies in the world, right? Those poor kids that go through that, and they have asthma, they have allergies, they have a lot of that histamine response in the body to just about anything. Well, those kids tend to end up having more of what's known as a Th2 dominance as they develop. And then later in life, they may be more susceptible to things that the immune system needed the Th1 cells for, such as COVID. So what I've seen with a lot of people that suffered from allergies and asthma really bad when they were younger is that they were actually more susceptible to coronavirus because of the way that their immune system developed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, when you talk about needing a balance in the immune system, what are we missing? What is our body not producing? Why are we unbalanced?
That depends on a lot of different things. It really depends on the person. It also depends on the exposures that we had early on in life. So when you have small amounts of exposure to things that agitate the system, that will then allow your Th2 response to handle that. It'll give, some of the cells that are more important to fight those threats, like the certain interleukins that are anti-inflammatory, or certain things in the body that actually help to handle those triggers. Unfortunately, if we, have certain things lifestyle-wise, food-wise, if we're not sleeping well enough, our immune system is not going to respond as well to any of our threats. So really, there are certain herbs, there are certain behavioral and lifestyle things that we can do to focus on balancing immune function. And, a lot of it is also just what we experienced growing up. If you look at someone that had every single cold that came around, well, they probably didn't really have many allergies. They just got a lot of colds. They just got, a lot of upper respiratory infections and things like that were more bacterial or viral, because at that time, their system had developed a lot of ways to fight the allergic response, but they overacted on the other side. So it's about that, swinging from one end to the other to be right in the middle there. So there's so many things that go into it. I'm sorry I can't give you just an exact answer on that one. A lot of it has to do with nutrition, lifestyle, exposures. And then later on in life, when we take a look at that, it's mainly looking at what has that person been susceptible to the majority of their life. And that's where it gets really interesting, is the fact that after everyone focused on, the vaccines to build viral defenses and the aspect of boosting our viral defenses with certain herbs and nutrients that are known to be antiviral, well, then everyone left the other side of their immune system open to that susceptibility to allergies. So you'll hear a lot over the last year to year and a half, people are saying my allergies are going crazy now. And so it's just to do with what have we supported. Unfortunately, when we are Th1 dominant and someone that rarely gets sick, they hardly ever have any illness. They're someone that, never gets a cold, never gets a virus, but then they end up with an autoimmune disease, because that side of the immune system creates this pro-inflammatory response. And that eventually, yes, it will keep us from getting sick, but that builds up those antibodies and it builds up the autoimmune response in our immune system. So it really is just that big, perfect storm that can be created in anyone's system. So we have to pay close attention to not only what they're typically susceptible to, but what they're doing on a daily basis. Are they sleeping enough? The sleep has a huge correlation with immune function, as well as nutrition and things like that.
And I want to ask you about sleep in just a moment, but let me stick with the kids at school for just a moment, because as you're talking, and I'm a parent, my kids are a little older at this point, but I remember when they'd come home from school, and if they had the sniffle, I knew it was coming my way. It was just one of those things. So what's happening there? I mean, when kids are going to school, do some kids not have enough of an immune system that those just general bugs, aren't something that their system can fight?
It could be that their immune system is on a lower level, that they have not developed the right cells to fight what they're experiencing. And that's what our early life is about, right? Getting those exposures so that we can take what's known as pluripotent stem cells in the immune system and differentiate them to fight what we're exposed to. So if they are doing everything that they can and the parents are doing everything that they can, then those exposures are perfectly fine. The immune system will respond, and it's okay if they, pick up everything that they encounter, as long as they appropriately develop the right immune cells to then be able to fight it off when they see it again in the future. However, what tends to happen, especially with going to school and things like that, it has a lot to do with whether or not the immune system is prepared to experience those exposures. And not only does that have to do with sleep, but it also has a lot to do with nutrition. One of the things when I'm speaking to my parents is I really push for them to make sure that they do not give their children too much sugar in the mornings. And unfortunately, I know that that's kind of one of the quickest ways to send them out to the bus with some nutrition is, some carbohydrates or some cereal or something along those lines. But typically, even the cereals, they're coated in sugar. And anything over 75 grams of sugar will reduce the immune function. So, unbeknownst to most parents, we're just trying to do what's best for our children. But then ending up to make sure that they're getting proper nutrition, we send them off to school, and yet their immune system has now been lowered for an hour or more every time they have exposure to more than 75 grams of sugar at a time.
And when you
so
talk
that's
about
a big one.
When you talk about carbohydrates, are you talking about breads and cereals and Pop-Tarts? And I know you said that like cereal is coated in sugar, but if we don't use up those carbs, don't those carbs turn into sugar too?
They exactly do. And so the carbohydrates themselves are sugars, and then we're adding the extra sugar on top for flavorings and things like that. And then by the time you look at that whole meal, you are seeing way above the amount of sugar that would be recommended for anybody in a sitting. And then knowing that that's going to then reduce their immune function, then they go into school having a lowered immune function, so their cells, their body cannot immediately fight that off. So then they tend to bring a lot of that home.
Yeah, right. And that's where, as a parent, you go, oh, it's coming my way. We're talking with Dr. Jennifer Hawks. She's the Chief Medical Director with Compassionate Certification Centers. And of course, we know them well here in Butler. And they moved recently. I say recently. When they originally came, they were at a different location, but 220 South Main Street in Butler. So it's a new location for you. So you can always check them out. And of course, they are online. Compassionate Certification Centers, if you want to go online and ask that or check the website out before you do go ahead and call, or just call and make an appointment. Because I do want to ask you, Dr. Hawks, how do you help in these scenarios? But let me first ask you a little bit about sleep before we get into the solution and of all of this. I'm going to ask in the way of adults, because I'm sure many adults for the past couple of years have had a lot of stress, as we all have, and many people may not be sleeping well. What's the cause behind us not sleeping through the night?
A lot of different things there. Sometimes it has to do with our circadian rhythm. And so what I find interesting is, I don't know if everyone's heard of this, but there is a stress hormone in the body known as cortisol. Cortisol has the opposite of melatonin for the relationship in the body. So everyone's heard that melatonin can help you fall asleep, right? Well, technically in the body, we should already have a high level of melatonin right before we want to fall asleep, and a low level of cortisol, which is the stress hormone in the body. And then in the morning when we wake up, we're supposed to have a low level of melatonin and a high level of cortisol. That's what gives us that get up and go, rah, 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 right? And so that typically tends to be an issue when our body is creating cortisol in high amounts later in the evenings. Now, this can come from stress. This typically does come from stress. It is pumped out from our adrenal glands in the body when we're under stress. Now, we produce this every single day for the body. This is very necessary. But what can happen is we can use up that cortisol to where we don't have enough, and then we end up being, groggy and not having that get up and go during the day. Or we may be extremely stressed and the body pumps out a ton of cortisol, leaving us feeling very anxious and unable to calm our minds and our bodies later in the night. So we can, of course, address sleep from that physiological standpoint of looking at the circadian rhythm and looking at the cortisol and melatonin levels, as well as adrenal health. I do this already with tons of patients, so I really encourage people to reach out, especially if they're experiencing high stress and trouble sleeping. What also tends to happen on a nutritional standpoint is if we don't get enough nutrition that is important for calming the nervous system. So let's say you are stressed and your nervous system is on edge. Well, if that's going on in your body, then maybe consider some of the nutrients that will help to reduce that stress and balance the nervous system. One of the ones I really point out to patients is magnesium. It's a mineral. It's used over 300 times daily in your body, and it's really important for balancing nervous system. It's also been known to help with restful sleep. So one of the very first things, if you just want to try something on your own that is completely safe to do, I would highly recommend increasing magnesium-rich foods. Things like leafy greens and beans and nuts are all really important to help with that balance for the nervous system. So that's one of the big things that happens is it could be nutrient related and our nervous system is on edge. It could have a lot to do with long-term chronic stress and our circadian rhythm. It also can have a lot to do with our hormones, but that's a whole nother giant to take on. So if any patients are concerned about that, please reach out personally to CCC and we can walk you through that as well.
Absolutely. And if folks do want to check that out online, CompassionateCertificationCenters.com, and then you can put in our location here in Butler. How do you help folks when they come to you? I'm sure there's a myriad of issues that you see and deal with. Is there one full safe plan that you have for individuals, or do you walk them through their individual situation?
I always customize everything, but I base it on what's known as the therapeutic order. So there's a time and place for everything in medicine, right? I wholeheartedly believe that. Hey, if you need a bypass, please don't call me, right?
Right. Yeah.
That is, more of please go to the hospital, please see your cardiologist, right? So that's how I approach it, is more from that therapeutic order standpoint. So what I first look at is known as the basic determinants of health. So I'm looking at that sleep, that nutrition, that aspect of giving your body what it needs to thrive. And then we go up from there. I can go up from there in supporting the body to heal itself with certain gentle techniques. I can go up from there with supporting certain organ systems that may have been damaged or weakened over time. And what I try to do is I try to remove the offending factors that are keeping our system from running perfectly, and then support the body to not only heal itself, but to optimize that organ function for each of those systems. And just to touch briefly on that aspect, I know we were just talking about sleep. Sleep is one of the biggest things that I do work with patients on because it matters so much for the whole body. And when I look at that, one of the biggest things that I can tell somebody to do is follow sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene is very important, and you can Google that word or reach out if you need any information on it. But it's about really creating the right environment for sleep. What often happens is people, they're just running around doing everything they need to do, right? We all get busy. But then at the end of the day, maybe they're too stimulated still. Maybe they have that cup of coffee at 4 p.m. instead of switching to something else. Or maybe they decided to work out late that night. Well, working out raises your cortisol. So that's a big one that I work on with people. Some of the things that I like to do for patients, other than just focusing on creating the right environment for health for their body, is also supporting them, because that aspect of emotional health is very important for our physical self. And when we're happy and when we're fulfilled in our lives, our anatomy and our physiology actually works better. So I do focus a lot on that. I often will use counseling and herbs. I do a lot of work with nutrition and herbs. Highly suggest some form of self-care that will really promote not only that internal piece, but also that physical balance.
When you talk about a whole body approach and you talk about herbs and you talk about keeping folks balanced with their immune system, some may hear me say compassionate certification centers and question, aren't they medical marijuana? So how does that work?
Right.
Can you talk about how you care for the whole person at compassionate certification centers?
Of course. So I offer additional services in addition to the certifications. So we want to be there for our patients in every way. And health is really about prevention, wellness, and quality of life. And that's one of the things I always like to focus on. So if I can help somebody not only with their overall health, but let's say they've been dealing with a lot of issues with, chronic pain. And I know that the regimen that they've been on with multiple opiates, they're not getting better and they're not feeling better. And it's actually creating more of a detriment for their overall system. So knowing what I know about cannabis, which I've researched for over 2 decades now, it's something that works with the body instead of against the body. So when I can find things that will support the system without trying to block the normal processing. So for example, let's say aspirin. Aspirin blocks what's known as the COX pathway in the body. So that's why it works to reduce inflammation, because that pro-inflammatory COX pathway, if we block that, we can block the inflammatory response. Versus the way that cannabis works. Cannabis works on receptors that you have from head to toe already. So it works to balance the receptors in your body known as the endocannabinoid system. And there's over 100 different constituents in the plant cannabis. So if we're looking at that as an option to not only balance the receptors that they already have in the body that are needed to make sure that we're putting out, the right response. Sometimes we need a pro-inflammatory response. Sometimes we need an anti-inflammatory response to really provide that balance for the system. So I love that about cannabis, that it's actually a plant that attaches to the receptors you already have in your body. It works with the system and it's adaptogenic. So if you need to upregulate something, cannabis can help with that. If you need to downregulate a process, cannabis can help with that. Instead of providing a synthetic option that's just blocking certain things and it's not looking at the whole person. So cannabis, the way that it works, actually works with the whole body and works with the receptors to balance the system physiologically. So that's part of the reason why I love it so much, is because it has been tried and true, tested over the years to work with the system, in so many different conditions that it can be beneficial for. And you'll see people, they may be suffering from things on the opposite side of the spectrum, but they're still getting benefit through cannabis because of the way it works with the system.
How important is it to work with a professional? I see so many times in like a checkout line, I see products for CBD, and I'm thinking, I don't know what it's made of. I don't know how much to take, and I'm not sure what I'm taking it for. So how important is it to work with a professional?
It's extremely important. I highly suggest that. In fact, when you do go to the gas station and you see the little CBD gummies or something like that, first and foremost, they may not test their products. They may not third-party test their products. And the quality is essential for any medicine, especially plant medicines. And when you look at that, you have to look at how it's grown, how it's processed, and then what they're using to extract the medicinal qualities from the plant to give you the desired effect.
So the steps of quality are very important.
The steps of quality are actually much more intense. You have the growing process and the processing of the plant and the extraction of the medicinal qualities to turn it into a medicine. So what I find a lot of times is you have some of these fly-by-night companies that really they just are chasing the gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
They see that CBD is popular, they see that it's beneficial, and they want the money from that side of the business. Versus when you have a company like CCC that not only third-party tests their products, it's all responsibly, sustainably grown hemp. They actually look at it as a medicine, and they hire professionals that know what they're talking about when it comes to cannabis. And not just myself. I'm talking about every doctor on staff there is highly knowledgeable about cannabis. So not only do you want to reach out to somebody to make sure you're getting a good product, you want the right information about that product, because as I stated before, there's over 100 different constituents in the plant cannabis. So maybe what's right for you is not what's right for the next person. And you really want a medical professional to take a look at that. There's certain constituents that can be stimulatory. There's certain constituents that can be sedative. And so we really want to look at the right type of medicine for the right type of patient and help the patients on that level to use it more medicinally.
Do you have any advice for people who just have not yet made the call? They've heard us talk about this for quite some time now, but they just haven't made the call to start the process.
Of course. First, I just want to say we're here for you. We are incredibly focused on patient advocacy, and every patient has the choice in their healthcare to not only choose a healthcare practitioner that they like, that treats them well, but also to choose the medicine that they prefer. And when we have something like cannabis that has been known to be very beneficial, despite the controversy, despite the issues in the media with it, we want our patients to feel comfortable. And there are a lot of ways that we can help you, even if you don't think that you qualify, but it's something that you know would be beneficial for you. Please call and talk to one of our specialists. We're here for you, and we want to make sure that our patients are taken care of.
Dr. Jennifer Hawks with Compassionate Certification Centers, 220 South Main Street here in Butler at Suite 105. The information is online on how to contact them, CompassionateCertificationCenters.com. And Dr. Hawks, before I let you go, we only have about a minute or two left. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us about CCC?
It's just actually a wonderful company. I'm so blessed to work with them. Every single employee, every single team member cares about their patients. They care about what we're doing for people. And that's why I like working for them. They really, we're a family, we're a team, and we're all very respectful of each other and respectful of patients. And that's the bottom line. I've worked for other places before that I just couldn't get behind their motives, and I just couldn't get behind the way that they treated certain people. And that's something that I love about CCC, is that every single person that walks through the door is treated with respect. They truly care about that patient's health, and we want to see them get better. It's not just about sales. It's not just about money. It's about truly making a difference and helping patients with what they choose as healthcare.
Dr. Jennifer Hawks, Chief Medical Director with Compassionate Certification Centers. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Tracy. It's been my pleasure, and I really look forward to speaking with you again and seeing all of those lovely patients that are in your area.
Absolutely, absolutely. And folks, thank you very much for joining us as well. We are out of time for this segment of Let's Talk, but you can always join us online and listen to this again in its entirety on our website, WISR680.com. You would click Programs, then Let's Talk, and then look for CCC. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Tracy Morgan with Let's Talk.